for joining us for Array, and this is the final workshop now for seminar for week 3. So for those of you who have not been on one of our workshops talks before, Array Festival has been put together to shine a spotlight on digital tech and innovation in the city region of Lancaster and Morecambe. Proudly supported by Fraser House, which is a digital and tech hub is on the White Cross that is due to open in early 2021, which is funded by Lancashire County Council. Also supported by Digital Lancashire as well. We are wrapping up the end of next week, so just to let you know, we've still got a lot more talks still to come. There's a very people focus to next week actually. If you visit arrayfestival.co.uk, you'll find the full listings available. Certainly next week it's very much focused on people and tech and how we interact with the technology that's around us. Oh yeah, caveat that I've got kids in the background, so if you hear any shouts and screams, that's them. Morning routines. Kids, the other thing, the one particular seminar I want to bring everyone's attention to is the closing showcase next Friday night, where we'll be wrapping up Array Festival, and we'll be celebrating a project that's been delivered by local photographer Nick Dagger called COVID Captures, a really exciting project, a really innovative project that showcases what's been going on in the world at this challenging time and how it's affected so many of our lives. So I invite you all to kind of come to that. The other thing that I want to point people's attentions to is that during over the last few weeks through the COVID pandemic, one thing that's been highlighted in the city region is the digital divide, and that almost 500 kids and families in our region do not have access to the internet, whether that be through lack of hardware or not having the connectivity available to them. A fantastic chap from Lancaster University, Joe Bourne, is running a project called Connecting Kids, and that is there to raise money to pay for connections, connectivity, hardware, laptops, tablets, whatever these families need, in order to make sure that these children are able to continue to work or do skill work, keep up to date with friends and family during this lockdown period. I've put in the chat box there a link to the Just Giving page, and any donations would be gratefully received. So this morning we've got Matt Brown, who is talking us and teaching us about creating brand and visual and whatever. I've worked with Matt for a number of years now, and I've got to say I want to kind of quickly, if you don't mind, Matt, just bring one story to the fold and the importance of visuals and brand and what have you. Many of you know that one of the big projects that I've worked on is Lancaster on Ice. It's been a huge success for the city. Matt was responsible for all the visual, all the content, so everything you saw online, all the visuals, all the images, all the branding around the site itself, the signage. Matt put all that together for us. And last year we had the importance of an image. We had to create an image in the build-up. Images was so important for us to be able to pre-sell tickets for the event. So we had to get artistic impressions of stuff. And Matt delivered us this fantastic image of, funnily enough, from a photograph that Nick Dagger had taken the year before, and imposed this great big wheel on there. And this striking image was literally everywhere in the build-up to Lancaster on Ice. It was on the front page of the Lancaster Guardian. It was in Lancashire Life. It was just picked up by all sorts of news channels. And the importance of that image to us was that it absolutely was a key factor in us being able to sell thousands of pounds worth of tickets that allowed us to then pay the event through and deliver that event. So, I think we've got a real treat in store this morning, because Matt's certainly someone who understands the importance of visual identity and what that can do for a business. So without anything else, Matt, I'm going to hand over. Please take it away.
Yeah. Okay. So after that build-up, I'll try not to disappoint too much. So I think you're going to have to bear with me a little bit this morning. This is the first time I've kind of done anything talk-based around what I do and brand in general. But I thought I'd give it a go, So who am I? Some of you might know me, some of you don't. My name's Matt or Matthew, also known as the Design Attic. So I've got 15 years experience working across brand identity, graphic design, digital, and also 3D design projects. So kind of during my career, I've had the opportunity to be part of building lots of brands for lots of different types of businesses, really, across a huge range of industries and sectors, as well as massive variation in size, from one-man startup businesses in the Lake District that have got a new product that they're wanting to kind of get out there and create a brand for that has then kind of enabled them to take their business and get it in shops like Harvey Nichols in Manchester, sell online globally, and get it to a point where the business can be sold for a good profit, and they've been able to retire, through to rebrands for big organisations that turn over £10 million, that have 500 employees. And the thing that I've learned over my career so far is that brand and design has a massive impact on every type of business. It's not just for big businesses. The kind of things that I'm going to talk about today, you can apply to your business, whether you are a one-man band, a startup, whether you think about rebranding for whatever reason, you can do that. So I'll just touch on my journey to where I am so far, and then we'll jump into the brand talk stuff. So, like I said, 15 years experience. I started my design career as a junior designer at a multidisciplinary studio up in Kendal in Cumbria. And I started there having absolutely zero experience. I hadn't worked in the design industry before. And working at a multidisciplinary design studio is kind of a complete different experience to a normal sort of graphic design studio. So multidisciplinary, if you're not quite familiar, is working across design projects that sort of span different types of design. So we worked on things like branding. We also worked on interior design. We did a lot of the graphic stuff. We also did things like product design, physical product, that is, that companies have gone out and sold. And I worked for all sorts of clients, including English Lakes Hotels, who own the Midland Hotel in Morecambe, and Lancaster House. I was part of a massive rebrand for that group, where we had to rebrand the group and all of their individual hotels. Worked on several projects for Booths supermarkets over the years, which have included bits of brand work, and also kind of topped off the last project I worked on there was an interior design project, which was really, really interesting and kind of helped to broaden my mind, really. Worked on the rebrand of all of the colleges within Lancaster University. They all have their own identity. I was part of the company. We redesigned all those identities to kind of unify and bring them together. And again, some kind of interior retail space design for Marks and Spencers, and other kinds of clients. So I left that business and founded the Design Attic in 2013 on my own. no clients, no kind of network. Started working out from my spare room at home, and from that I kind of built up a local business where I work with lots of local smaller clients to start with, and over the years that's kind of built up, and now I kind of work with a range of businesses. Do quite a lot in the hospitality, leisure and tourism industry. And I've got quite a lot of experience in building brands within that environment and that industry. And also, you know, some of the clients locally that I've worked with that you might know, you might not. So I created the brand for the Morecambe Hotel back in when it opened and refurbed, you know, in 2015, I think it was. I've recently done some work with Manchester Football Association on creating a sub-brand for inclusive football. Obviously worked with Lancaster on Ice and lots of other kind of businesses within those sectors. And like I said before, the one thing that I've learned that kind of drives what I do is seeing the massive impact that thinking about brand can have on any type of business. So today I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 things that I think will be useful. So I'm going to start off with, I'm going to run through the differences between brand, branding and brand identity. There is a difference, so we're going to go through that. I'm going to touch on the key elements that make up your brand identity. Also, the reasons why you might want to consider your brand or why you might be looking at brand. And then I'm going to dig into how you're going to start to define what your brand is. You know, how can you dig in and start to pull together, you know, a bank of information and thoughts that will kind of start to build the foundation of your brand. So there's going to be an opportunity for any questions at the end of the talk. So if you've got any, or you think of anything as I'm kind of talking through, just write them down. And what we'll do is at the end of when I've finished, we'll open the floor up, and you can ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. So I'm going to share my screen now. If anybody can't see it, just let me know. Dan, I think you need to just let me share the screen, please. It won't let me do that. Super. All right, so can anybody not see that screen? I presume it's there and fine for everybody. So like I said, I'm going to talk about how to define your brand. That's kind of going to be at the end. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the difference between the 3: brand, branding, and brand identity. You know, before we start, I'm just going to ask you to do a little quick 1-minute thing. So as we know, brands are everywhere. You know, living in the digital world, we can't get away from brand and brand identities. So I'm just going to ask you all very quickly, have a look around the room you're in, or your bag, or your handbag. You know, how many brand logos can you count, you know, within a minute or 30 seconds? So I'm imagining, you know, looking around your rooms or in your bag or whatever it is, you know, there's brands everywhere. And I think nowadays, especially given that we are a digital world, brands are everywhere. Consumers are so brand savvy, and brands are constantly competing with each other for our custom and for our money, you know. And we often make purchasing decisions based on those brand values and how they align with our own, you know. So we might buy a certain brand of trainer because it aligns with us, you know. It might be price driven, but often it's because we kind of connect with their values, you know. So that's something you need to think about with your own brand. So I'm going to flip through now and go through these three definitions and talk about those. So what is a brand? The word brand is used very, very loosely these days, and quite often in the wrong context. So people use the word brand very often to talk about a logo or, you know, anything to do with a logo. But a brand is much more than that. So the brand is very hard to define. You know, the brand is basically a set of intangibles, assets of your company, service, product. The brand is kind of a relationship between you, your business, and the customers, you know. So, you know, we're constantly discovering new brands and products and businesses. You know, it could be a new product in the supermarket on the shelves that you've not seen before that catches your eye. You know, it could be a new tech company, you know, a clothing brand that you've never heard of, but it's all of a sudden ended up on your Facebook feed or your social media, and you've explored and discovered it. You know, and the thing is with all this is that there's so much competition that it creates an infinite amount of choices for people, for consumers. And, you know, businesses are always looking to connect on a kind of emotional level with their customers and build a relationship. Because if you build a relationship as a business, you become irreplaceable. You know, your customers and people that are kind of become loyal to your business, you know, and they become fans and brand ambassadors and help your business to grow through that, you know. So if you want to stand out in a crowded marketplace, which, to be fair, nowadays most marketplaces are crowded, you know, there is too much of everything almost, you know. You need a strong brand to connect with that audience, you know. So people fall in love with brands. They trust them and believe in them, you know. And it doesn't take much for some bad PR to cause massive damage to your brand reputation. So, you know, if you're going to look at examples, I mean, this is a dead obvious one and something that will, you know, if you take Apple as an example, you know, there are brand fanatics out there who will just buy their product because of their brand, you know. It might not be any better. It definitely won't be any cheaper than anything out there on the market, but people buy it because they are brand fanatics, you know, they love the brand. So that's just shows the power. You know, and how a brand is perceived affects the success of your business. So in one sense, and this is kind of what I say to clients, is your brand needs to demonstrate a promise. It needs to represent a promise to your customers, your clients, your audience that you deliver on. And to be fair, you know, with brand and brand building, when I started out 15 years ago, digital, whilst it was there, wasn't actually that important or that big a deal, you know. So we're now in a completely different landscape in terms of how we connect with our audience, and with that, you know, the needs of our customers and connecting with them has kind of been blown up on a big scale thanks to digital. So, you know, if you deliver on your promise, your brand promise, you'll keep your customers happy, and they will continue to build confidence in your brand and trust you and recommend you and work with you. So you know what you're going to get. If I'm a customer and I've got a relationship, I know what I'm going to get. I can guarantee what I'm going to get. So brand is a relationship between your business or organization and your audience. So the next thing I'm going to move on to is brand identity. So a brand is what people think about you when you're not in the room. So how can you influence that? How can you influence what your audience thinks about you when you're not there? So this is where brand identity comes into play. So brand identity is the visual representation of your brand. It's everything that somebody can see related to your business. So, they can see it, touch it, hold it, listen to it, watch it move, whether that's through video, animation, So everything visual about your brand is known as your brand identity. And this is where the confusion is, and this is where often people kind of talk about brand when really they're talking about brand identity. So depending on the applications of your brand, if you're a particular type of, for example, if you're a tech business, the elements within your sort of brand identity system are going to be very different if you're say a retailer, or a craft business or something like that. You've got different channels and different platforms. So those elements will be different and need to be considered depending on that. So the application is kind of what drives some of this. So the applications vary. It could include print, it could be sort of motion graphics, it could be social media stuff, digital design. You also need to think about, and this is where I've kind of learned over the years, is that a brand should come alive in a 3D kind of way. So the projects, like I say, when I've always been involved with, brand is always at the heart of any design project. And when you're talking about physical space as well, we think about office interiors, we think about retail shops. They bring the brand to life. So if you have got a space, how can you take your brand identity and think about that space? Or it could be on some signage, it could be exhibition. So 2D and 3D should be kind of thought about together. So what does your brand identity consist of? So these are all elements that you'll all be familiar with, and I'm going to kind of dig into a little bit more detail a little bit later on. But so your brand identity consists of things like your logo or your word mark or logo type, key colours, corporate typefaces or the fonts that you use. You might have a kind of typographic treatment, so a way that you do type. You might do headlines in a particular style, a particular way, and also imagery, and that can range. It could be the style of the photography. It could be that your brand identity uses illustration, and it's pulling all those elements together that kind of create the brand identity. And the key to all this is consistency across everything that you're involved with. That's the number one thing that you need to keep in your head: consistency. Because without consistency, people become confused. People don't know if it's you or not. It's very difficult to build a business and to build a brand and an identity without consistency. So the main purpose of brand identity is to kind of set guidelines, on how to use those visual bits and pieces and how we work with them and how you might use them as part of an advertising campaign, a piece of print on your website. So that's kind of what that is, and like I said, the logo is not your brand identity. It's part of it, but it's only a small part. So I'm now going to flip on to the next thing I want to talk about, which is, so what is branding? So we talked about brand being the relationship between business, organisation and customers. Brand identity is the visual representation of your business. So what is branding? So branding is a process, and that is creating the name for the product or the business or the service, and create something unique that will stick in the customer's mind. Branding can be a massive game changer for businesses. So the process of branding is kind of mainly done through campaigns, through advertising campaigns, where you take a consistent theme and consistently use your brand identity and seize every opportunity to talk to your audience and help them to choose you over another. So your brand should branding communicates your characteristics, your values and attributes that kind of clarify what you're all about versus your competitor. So it's up to you how you take those and communicate those. So there are different types of branding, and I'm just going to touch on these, and some of you will understand. So there's kind of 5 types of branding. So there are things like co-branding. So this is very good, where 2 brands might partner up with each other, where they've got a kind of similar audience, or a similar goal, or a similar stance on a particular issue, and they will co-brand and they will work together, which will help them both grow by reaching each other's audience, because their audiences will have interest in similar kind of things. And if they're kind of interested in one type of organisational business, there's a very good chance that through that partnership and that co-branding, they'll be interested in both. So there's then digital branding. So digital branding is the web, social media, search engine optimization kind of fits in there a little bit, and driving people to buy on the web. So the next one is personal branding. So this is something that I think most of us are kind of constantly aware of, that whilst we might have a business and a brand identity for the business, our personal brand needs to tie to that. And our personal brand can kind of put us at the front of somebody's mind, and it helps us to build our reputation. So there's then things like cause branding. So you might choose to align your brand with a particular charity or charitable cause, or a social responsibility agenda, which interests you, is relevant, and helps your business do good. And then the last thing, which I'm just going to touch on a little bit, is something called place branding. So place branding applies to all sorts of things. We talk about towns, cities, countries, and even kind of tourist attractions and stuff. So place branding is designed and to help attract tourists, businesses, investment into a particular area. So those types of branding are the kind of five main things that I kind of talk about. And what ties those together is there's a desire to kind of clarify what's being offered through brand. So, you know, whether it's product, service, or a person, image and consistency plays a huge role. You know, you might want your audience to see your brand as, for example, trustworthy, progressive, friendly, but how they actually see you might be completely different to the way you want them to see you. So that's something that you kind of need to think about, and something that is, from a research point of view, is really important. So the next thing I'm going to kind of do is move on to just sum up the three, and then we're going to move on into the key elements of brand identity. So to sum up what we've just kind of touched on, you know, brand is a relationship between customers and business. A brand identity is what we can see. It's everything visual that the customer comes into contact with, wherever they may find your business. And branding is the process of taking that brand identity and using it to build awareness of your business. So that's touching on the three sort of different definitions of those things. So what I'm going to do next is move on to the key elements of brand identity. So your brand identity is made up of several key elements that all combine to visualize your brand. So, you know, the first one that is something that, like I say, it's only a part of it, but it's a really important part because it's the first immediate representation of your business. It's something that people will see, and it needs to kind of connect and represent the business, but it's not the only thing. So when we talk about logo, there's kind of six types of logo that you'll come across. So the first one is the logo type. So a logo type usually just focuses on the name of the business or the product. Usually it is very effective if you've got a distinctive, original, unique business name. And these are usually designed to convey one of your brand attributes. They don't work for everybody, but there's no kind of hard and fast rule. I think it really depends on your approach. So the second one is a monogram or a letter mark. So a monogram is purely typography and is usually made up of company letters or initials. Monograms are always dead clear, easy to understand, and legible. They work particularly well at small sizes, for, you know, on the web, on digital, and are very easy to recognise because of the simplicity. So the third one is pictorial. So pictorial logos are very literal. They usually take a literal image, simplified, stylized, to create something, to create a logo. Quite often used by bigger brands and global brands because they're globally easy to understand. You know, you don't need to explain. They cross multiple cultures. They cross multiple languages without any problem. Fourth one on the list is sort of the abstract symbolic type. So these kind of in its simplest form, an abstract logo represents a big idea in a very simple form. So it's not taking something literal, it's taking something that's an idea. For example, it could be movement. With the Olympic logo that I've kind of picked out here as an example, the Olympics brings together and connects the audience, the different countries through sport. So that works for that. The fifth one is an emblem. So an emblem is where the words or the logo, the business name is kind of inextricably linked with a pictorial element. So not as common because of the complexity of them nowadays and the need for a logo to be represented and reproduced at a very small size, potentially, up to something much, much larger. But it is another kind of route that you can explore. And number 6 is kind of a combination of the above, really. And is probably the most commonly used, especially by smaller businesses, because if they've got, for example, a pictorial symbol, it's not going to be particularly known or recognised because people won't necessarily know the name. So a combination, like I say, is most commonly used, and it uses a symbol alongside a logo type or a monogram. The good thing about combination marks is they can be used together, like as you see with the Premier League one, or you can take those elements apart and they can be used individually. So that's logo. So we'll move on to the next thing. So look and feel is a massive important thing for brand. So your look and feel is a combination of colour, imagery, typography, layout and composition. It's a visual language that makes your brand immediately recognisable. As I've said before, consistency across all those touch points is crucial. One thing with the look and feel is that you should be able to take something and cover up the logo with your thumb, and the look and feel should be unique, and you should be able to know that it's a particular business even by covering the logo. So look and feel, like I said, it combines several elements. So colour is really important, and is something that can be quite often overlooked. Colour has lots of different meanings depending on culture, depending on what country you're in. So you need to be really careful when you're picking colour. And you also need to pick something that's relevant. So colour is good at evoking emotion and helps you to express your personality or your business's personality. It's easily recognisable. It helps people recognise your brand, and it also helps you to differentiate between your competition. So we always naturally associate colours with particular brands. We think red, we think Coke, we think yellow, we think the McDonald's arches. There's ways that colour work, which is really, really clever. So, like I say, with the colours that I've got on screen, this is just a touch, really. There's much more depth to colour. But as an example, these colours mean these different things. So red can kind of symbolise excitement, strength, love, energy. It can also be a sign of danger, so you've got to be really careful with that kind of colour. Orange, confidence, success, bravery, sociability, can be used to kind of symbolise creativity. Yellow, great happiness, warmth, positivity. Green, good for nature, healing, fresh, quality. Blue's a colour that we kind of see a lot around financial services and professional services, banks, etc. Because blue is a colour that is used as trust. It's a safe colour, And then we've got the others below, pink. Pink can be used for, compassion, sophistication, sweet. It's also a really good way to differentiate yourself. Like I said, colour rules, and the way colour is used, whilst it's always good to kind of consider these things, it's also good to break the rules every now and then. If you think Dino Rod with their fluorescent orange, that immediately helps you to recognise that business and differentiate them from everything else. So I'm going to move on now to typography, fonts. So typography is probably one of the main parts of the identity, of your brand identity. So choosing the right font is very important. You kind of need to think about fonts that convey a particular feeling that you want to communicate to your audience, and also reflect the positioning of your business. It's always important to make sure that any fonts that you choose work across different applications. The way that technology is advanced, and with the web now, 10 years ago, we used to have a selection of maybe half a dozen fonts that we could use on web. Now, it's kind of endless, web typography and digital type, and the way that that's used has enabled brands to be more consistent across all their elements. Type also helps you differentiate from your competitors. You should always make sure it's legible and has some personality that reflects your business's personality. So these 5 are the 5 main categories of font, and I'll just touch on why you might want to use them and why they're good for particular types of business. So the first one, the South Bank Centre logo. So that's a serif typeface. So a serif typeface, when they're used in the right way, can make a brand feel cultured, sophisticated, and they're often used across fashion, academic, and within culture sectors. So Spotify is a sans serif. So sans serifs are always smooth, simplicity. They're functional, and they're also very well proportioned. They work well for maybe digital first companies or tech companies that want to kind of represent maybe efficiency, things like that. Third is the Mozilla typeface. Now, obviously, this is a custom logo type. But a slab serif is a very kind of functional, workman-like typeface. It kind of is based on the original typewriter style lettering, and the slab serif, like I say, is good for those kind of things. The way it's been used here links to the way that coding is done. So coding is often done, and coding programs use that style. So that's why the Mozilla one and that approach has been taken, because it ties in with code. So I've got script, so Cadbury's. So many of the best script logos make businesses kind of more friendly and approachable because they feel like handwriting. They're also very good for heritage-based companies. Cadbury is an example here. This is a new version of their script logo type that has been recreated recently, which is based on the founder's handwriting. But script can work really well when you are kind of going down the heritage route. Stencil is something that is kind of a bit of a funny one, to be honest, but used in the right way, stencil type or that style kind of gives a nice extra layer of depth and can sort of give across style and class. So those are things that I'll touch on. I mean, there's other things that kind of tie into this. So there's the imagery, like I said before. Imagery is really important, and photography isn't for everyone. You know, you need to think really, really, really hard about this, and creating a recognisable identity. Imagery is key. It can be photography, it could be image, it could be illustration. It could also be icon led. You know, we see a lot of icons. Icons have become very familiar to everyone as they're kind of universally recognised. And there are some businesses that purely use an icon approach to their imagery. So getting that right is also another part of it. So that's touching on identity and the sort of key elements. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is why, you know, reasons why you're going to kind of consider investing in brand or design in general, you know. And these range from business reasons through to some practical reasons. So business reasons, which are some of them are kind of quite obvious, I guess. You know, you might be starting a new business, you know, getting that identity right at the start of the business is really important. It builds that foundation and a platform for you to push on from and to use and leverage. You might be launching a new product or service within your business, and actually you might need to look at reviewing the brand to make sure that ties together with the new product service. You might be changing the company name for whatever reason that may be. There's lots of reasons why you could change your company name, but when if that's going to happen, reviewing and looking at your brand is a good idea. Then you might be investing in brand to generate more awareness, you know, to help you appeal to a new market that you might not have been communicating with before, and actually your existing brand doesn't connect to that audience particularly well, you know. It might be a company merger, you know. You might have had a company buyout and all of a sudden there's a need to look at how that works from a brand identity point of view. Other things, simple things, you know, you might look outdated, you might look unprofessional, you know. It might be that your competitors have all rebranded over a period of time over the past few years, and all of a sudden you look way behind, you know, and you need to improve your identity and your visual presence. There's also practical reasons, so practical things that you might be struggling with, and this was particularly more of an issue a few years ago, but I still come across businesses whose brand, etc., doesn't work well and reproduce in a particular way. You know, it might not work well on web. You know, I had a client a couple of years ago who were looking for a new website, and we talked it through. But actually what we did, we ended up going a step backwards and re-looking at the brand identity as a whole to then implement that across a new website, because their existing identity just didn't work. You might have reproduction issues. You know, your logo might be incredibly complex and not scaled down small to be embroidered on a t-shirt, for example, or as a social icon on Facebook or LinkedIn. You know, it might be that there's a lack of consistency across all the platforms, and you need to think about sort of unifying that and bringing that together to make it consistent. So those are just a few of the reasons. why you might be thinking about investing in brand or design, or why you might want to. So what I'm going to touch on now and what I'm going to go into is starting to define your brand and your business. Now, this is kind of the start of a process, and it isn't designed to be the definitive answer to defining your brand. Like I said, it's a process that takes time, but this process is probably the most important part. Without this, how do you know what you're creating is right and is the right approach for your business? So there's some things that, you know, if you're going to start to pull together information and thoughts and research, you should always start with basic stuff. So, for example, you know, the business name, the location, the number of years in business, you know, the number of employees, you know, what the product or service is. Think about the challenges that the business faces, you know, and who are your competitors. Those are the basics that you should always think about as a starter. And they will kind of give you a good little bit of information on what the business is and what it's all about. You might have other things. You might have had marketing reports produced by other companies, you know, anything that you can pull together that fits around those things. So, you know, product, services, the challenges of the business. And from the way I approach this, depending on the kind of business and the size of business, sometimes I will do sort of a one-to-one if it's a smaller business, or we'll just sit around and have a coffee and we'll talk all these things through and make lots of notes and scribbles. You know, if it's a bigger business where you might have 6 people, for example, who need to be involved in the process, then I will do a workshop where I find the best way to do a workshop is to take the people out of the business. So in the past couple of years, we've done workshops for companies where we'll hire a location and a room. We'll take all of the key staff that need to be involved out of the business for half a day, and we will work through a number of kind of exercises, questions, thinking, which allows everybody to have input that's important to the development of the business. So those are the basic bits of information. After that, there's several kind of audits that I like to carry out and that you should think about. Now, depending on your sector, your industry, what your business does, there will be other things that you'll need to look into and research. But these are kind of 5 key things to start with. You know, the word audit, it does sound a little bit boring, but it's really important to help you get a full understanding of your business and help to make it clear what the challenges are. You know, you might have individuals within your business that are completely unaware of the challenges that you're facing with your brand and your identity. So the types of audit to consider, you know, a visual audit. So a visual audit really helps everybody that's involved to visually see where the issues are, you know. So things you should pull together for this is everything that you can find, whether it's print, online, marketing materials. It could be that you've got various versions of a logo that are used by different people, but none of them are quite the same. You know, there might be 5 or 6 different versions of fonts that people use or that you use for marketing, colours, everything visual that you already have and is out there for potential customers to see needs pulling together and putting on it. It might be a mood board, you know, you might stick them on the wall, but to have all that pulled together will give you a really good picture visually of where your identity is currently sitting. Next is a verbal audit. So this can be a very straightforward sort of list of keywords and phrases that your business uses at the moment to communicate your key messages. The benefits of this are to kind of help you to look at the way that you speak, or your brand speaks, and helps you to either improve it so it reaches your audience better, or to completely change direction if it's not working. So that's kind of a nice simple listing thing, but you should really go into depth with that and pull together as much as you can find. Then there's a behaviour audit. Now, with behaviour, this isn't right for everybody. But if you're a business that interacts with customers directly, what you should be looking at here is how your employees speak to customers, potential customers, how they talk, how they interact with them, whether it's through social media, whether it is email, on the phone, in person. At the end of the day, they're representing your brand. So to have an audit of how these people who are representing your brand, your employees, to know how they are actually, representing when they're out and about and communicate with your audience is really important. Then we've got a competition audit. So what you should be doing for this is kind of think about your key competitors. Now, depending on the sector and what your offer is, you might want to look at the top 3. You might want to dig deeper and pull together half a dozen, maybe 10. It really, really depends. But your competitor audit should take the 3 things that we've talked about above. So a visual audit, a verbal audit, and a behaviour, and take those and do those on your competitors, because that'll give you a really good indication of how they are approaching the same kind of issues that you are. And you can see what works and what doesn't. It helps you to understand in the kind of spectrum where you sit. And then the last one is something that is it helps you to kind of aspire to something. So a peer audit, don't look at your own sector specifically. You should be looking at multiple sectors for this. So what this should do is this should pull together examples of businesses and organisations that you might aspire to be like, but within your own sector, or something that you want to benchmark against in the future, or you want to kind of set a level and that's where you want to be. So to pull together that is really, really useful. So moving on from there, once we've pulled together all the basic information and you've done your audits and pulled all that together, the one thing that really should be given a lot of time, and with this you should really allow people to answer this. So if you're a bigger organisation, you might have somebody that's the marketing, you might have the CEO, the directors, the people who are on the front line. If you're a business that delivers a service, it could be the people that are actually out there on the front line, face to face with customers. Get as many people as you can to feed into this bit, because they will all have different thoughts on this. And actually, this really helps you to define what you're all about by getting as much input as you can. So 7 things really to kind of think about with this. So why are we here? These all sound very simple questions, but they're very difficult to answer. So why are we here? So this should be a simple statement that sums up your core purpose. Usually can be quite emotional, and they're usually very simple. You know, it should be simplified. It should be a few headline words or a sentence, you know, that just sums up why are we here. But you need to give that some really deep thought as to why are you here? What are you there for? The second thing is what we do and how we do it. You know, this is much easier. So this is usually very descriptive. You know, it's kind of the nuts and bolts about what you actually do and how you deliver that. You know, functional statements. But like I've said, depending on the size of your organisation, different people might have different thoughts on this. And that's what the point of this is that you can bring all those together and really kind of hone in on what you do and how you do it. What makes you different? Now, we talk about USPs a lot within business and stuff, and quite often I'll have a meeting with a client and we'll talk about, you know, what makes you unique. And for example, you know, the problem is now that everybody kind of says the same things, you know. So if we're in the hospitality industry or the food and drink industry in particular, for example, everybody kind of says the same. It's very difficult to pull out what makes you different. You know, everybody says the food's locally sourced, you know, it's all local. We cook it in house. Everything is the same. You know, all the hotels are a boutique. You know, everybody says that we've got great service. Those things are kind of a given. You'd expect those. What you should be looking here is to kind of go into what really makes you different from your competitors, because it'll help to position you in a different place, position you away from where your competitors are. It'll also help you to enhance anything that is really unique, because with brand identity, to tie that onto something that is really unique is really important, because that will be used as a key marketing message then. So the next one is who we're here for. So I often ask clients, and this isn't necessarily the answer, but I often ask clients who their ideal client is, you know. And when I'm talking about that, I like them to go into as much detail as they can, you know. Who are they? Where are they? You know, what do they like? What are they into? You know, as well as the basic stuff like, are they female? You know, what age bracket do they sit within? It's really good to be very specific with ideal client. And you might not have, it might not be one ideal client for everything. If you're a business that's got different services or different parts to it, you will have a different audience potentially for all those different things. So the who we're here for, you know, the key audiences and customers for the business, product or service, and then think about what the message is for each of those audiences. So the next one, which we'll move on to, what do we value the most? Now, what these should be, and this is why getting different people to feed into this, these are the core beliefs of the business that need to be shared, and to create a successful brand, these values and beliefs should be shared by the founders, directors, employees, anybody that's a part of that business. These values unify everybody. So to get everybody to feed in and to kind of define what those beliefs and values are is really important. Personality. There's ways of kind of looking at personality, and there are different kind of exercises and models on personality types and brand personalities. But the personality of your brand is how does it express itself to the outside world? You know, what's the character of it? You know, what's the tone of voice, and how do you communicate that? So that should just think of some thoughts around those sort of things. And the last one is sort of a long-term aim thing, really. So what's the ambition? It's always good as part of the process to understand where the business is heading. You know, what are the plans for the next 5 years? Because when you're creating an identity and investing in doing something like this, you've got to think about the future. So the ambition of the business is really, really something that you should be thinking about, as well as all these other key questions. So those audits, research tasks, questions, they're all designed to help give you a really, really full understanding of your business, challenges, thoughts, anything that will influence the identity before you kind of start on the visual stuff. You know, research is the most important point and starting thing for this. You know, it kind of is the foundation. Without the research, you're just kind of firing into the dark. You don't know whether it will work. So whilst this is quite a time-consuming task, it's something that is invaluable and critical for every kind of business. And like I say, it should always involve stakeholders where possible, you know, different people within a business. You know, don't skip the step. Like I say, and the more depth you go into, the better understanding and solid and a foundation you'll kind of create to move on and create a brand. So that's kind of it from me. I think I've touched on quite a few things there that I think will help you to understand brand identity and branding, as well as how you could start on defining what your brand's all about. And if you are kind of thinking about branding, to have all that information pulled together before you even approach somebody to start looking at it is a massive, massive thing. Really important, and will really help somebody to have a really good idea of what you're all about. So I think next we will open up some questions from audience members, if anybody's got any.
Thanks. Matt, can you take the share screen off?
Yeah, I'm just doing that now. Yeah, is that gone?
Yes.
Let me just bring this up a bit bigger. Cool.
I think
yeah.
If everyone's still on. I think it's a small enough group that people could just kind of ask questions as they want, I think. I've certainly got a couple. So I'll kick off, but if anyone wants to kind of raise the hand or to just kind of voice a question as well, then please do. Just on that last point, Matt, with the questions, the research, I'm thinking as a marketing manager or someone coming to a graphic designer or an owner of a business, or how do you want that how can we present that information to someone like you?
To be fair, it varies. It varies on the business. I'm quite open to. You might be dead into pulling mood boards together. You might grab all the visual stuff. You might put a mood board together. You know, lots of people use things like Pinterest. You might create a Pinterest board and stick stuff on there. To be fair, you might just give a big folder full of information. I think the most important thing is that it's not necessarily about how it's presented, because as an agency or a designer, you're going to take all that information and you're going to do your own research as well.
Right.
This is kind of taking, these are sort of the first steps that'll help to guide and give you a really good overview. And for me, I've had clients who'll give me a folder. I've had them who'll send me an email with a PDF of everything nicely typed up. As long as I can understand it all, it doesn't actually matter for me personally.
Okay. And the other one is, I'm sure if you kind of, a lot of people, I've worked with lots, over the years, worked with several different designers and different levels of experience. What do you think, in the very least, what do you think a good designer should be able to articulate when they sort of bring you a design of something?
So, I think.
The reason I ask that is because sometimes I kind of, I've often found you can get some people that are a bit hit and miss,
Yeah.
and I feel like some people might just kind of pull a design out of the air kind of thing and here's your design, here's your logo, and it's a bit like, right.
Yeah, I think the key is research every time. As a designer, without kind of looking into those things and researching and getting a good brief in the first place, if the brief is bad, ultimately the outcome will be bad. Your designer will interpret your brief, but like I said, if you're not clear in the first place what you're actually looking for or what you're needing, then it's very difficult to take that and create something that really connects.
Has anyone else got any questions that they want to pull out there as well? Is any?
Yeah, I've got one, Dan, for Matt. I didn't realise you'd worked on so many really big profiles before. Like big branding and stuff, Matt. Is there one that you particularly in your career that either working for someone or for, for yourself that you really stand out, you're really proud of?
I think when I look back, the project for English Lakes Hotels was probably one of my favourites. Now, that was a massive rebranding. At the time, English Lakes Hotels were really struggling to sell hotel rooms. It was very difficult for them to connect with their audience. Primarily because their online presence was poor. Their hotels were very, very disparate. They were very disjointed. There was no overall identity for the thing. So what we created at the time was an identity for the group as a whole. So as a group, they could go out and market the whole group of hotels that they have and everything about the group. But individually, we had to create a sub-brand for each individual hotel. Now, the good thing with that is that, all the hotels, they had 6 at the time, they all have different personalities, different audiences, different characteristics, and they're all good for different things. The Midland Hotel is Art Deco and has got a particular audience. Lancaster House is very good for business. It's a great hotel if you're stopping for work or you've got a conference. So really digging into that and sort of coming up with identities that fit the values of each hotel, as well as within the group, was probably my favourite. And I think that was one I was most involved with where I worked before I left. I think in the end it was that brand. I mean, it's still used today. That must be 10 years ago at least now. But it's consistent. They apply it really well. And at the time, I had to produce a kind of brand guidelines book, which literally guided their marketing teams on how to do it. And, that was probably a 100-page document, which literally covered every eventuality. As well as stuff like, art directing the photo shoots for the particular hotels, booking models, that, literally involved in everything to do with that. So yeah, that was probably the favourite.
And I do have another question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned obviously the sector that you tend to work in. That's hospitality has massively been hit with COVID. Are you seeing different approaches for these types of businesses, or are people sort of waiting to see with what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, hospitality is something that I've worked on a lot. I mean, I've got clients that are kind of doing it differently. one client in particular has decided to sell up once this is kind of moved on, they're going to sell, you know. Now, whether they were thinking about that before or not, I'm not sure. As we know, the hospitality, everything's closed, isn't it? So any projects within that sector are kind of on pause, I guess. The good thing for me is that I have lots of clients in lots of different sectors. So I'm not too hung up on that industry in terms of, for me. But I think there's going to be a lot of challenges. I don't think there's a lot of opportunity for the hospitality industry, though. Once things kind of start to move on, I actually think that hospitality businesses, whilst they are putting everything on pause, they should probably be thinking about what next, you know, because I'd imagine there's going to be a real opportunity for British tourism, stay-at-home holidays, all that kind of thing is really going to kick off. I've got one client at the moment who told me the other day that one of their kind of key venues aren't doing any events for 12 months. Once coronavirus sort of eases off, it's going to be another 12 months before they start doing events. So there's a lot to think about for that industry.
Wow, that's a point. That's a statement, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
I liked Richard's comment yesterday from Skiddle. He said when we're able to, and hopefully, you know, you mentioned about Christmas and stuff. You know, we're the hospitality sector needs us to have the Christmas of all Christmases. That was from yesterday's Array Festival chat. It was a good comment. That
it does. I think the worry is that will be impacted as well.
Yeah, would you advise brands to pivot as a result of COVID? And what opportunities do you see for brands and events and direct to consumer businesses?
I think in terms of pivoting, Nathan, it's a funny one, isn't it? I think for businesses to pivot completely from what they do is a massive ask. And I'm not convinced personally that it's always the right answer. A lot of brands and businesses we've seen have kind of taken what they do and have now become an online version of it. You know, that kind of pivoting, without a doubt, is important. And you know, with hospitality, for example, you know, we've seen clients selling vouchers to use in the future and all that kind of thing. I think opportunities for brands in events, direct to consumer businesses, it's very difficult. I think we're too early in all this to see where this might end or where there might be any opportunities at the moment. In terms of events, I think it's very difficult to plan, really. And if you're a brand that is particularly event-led, I think there's going to be some serious questions to be asked about where next. Obviously, with things like Array Festival, Dan's moved it online, which has worked great, you know, and where there's opportunity to move an event online, brilliant. You know, Nick was talking about Highest Point and stuff. It's very difficult to take that and the impact that has on the area and move that online. So I think for some businesses it's definitely the right approach. For others, I think it's going to be difficult to adjust to that, really.
Can I ask a question, Dan? Is that all right?
Of course, yeah, please do.
So thanks for that, Matthew. That was really fantastic presentation. So my name is Jack. I represent an organisation called Lancaster District CVS, which is an infrastructure for the charity sector across the Lancaster District.
Yeah.
And we're sort of fast approaching our 50th anniversary. We've got two logos, one that represents our organisation, which is a blue logo, and then we're a volunteer centre, so we coordinate volunteering across the district, which is in red colour. So we've been successful in getting some funding to really redesign our website. myself and our trustees have been going through a heck of a process in thinking through what that might look like, and the message, and but we've been working. So we're quite. It's an unusual situation for us because we've not had money to do this for probably 15, 20 years. So it's been great to listen to you. So and we've been working with some web companies locally who offer this kind of complete package from brand design right through to web completion.
Yeah.
In your experience, I think one of the things that we've got a sticking point over is, do we stick with the web design company and let them host that conversation around branding, or do we take that externally, that with people like yourself who have that 15-year experience and really dedicated to that very specific part of the development? So you might not want to answer that honestly, but
I will.
but what's your experience of that, web companies presenting that whole package? Are we best off looking outside of that and, seeking more specialised advice?
Yeah. So to be fair, those that know me will know that I am incredibly honest in the way I speak about these sort of things. So for me, given my experience locally with certain sort of individuals and businesses, it's very difficult for a purely web company to offer brand. It's a completely different thing. Your web is kind of an implementation of your brand. But often you will find that they don't have the experience and the kind of knowledge, and quite often they will skip the research part. And for me, as an example, I kind of touched on it before. I had a client a couple of years ago come to me for a new website, and I kind of said, well, will the new website answer the issues that you've got? And actually what came about that was that the problem wasn't the website necessarily. The problem was that the brand wasn't right in the first place. So we kind of took a step back to build that foundation to be able to then create the brand identity and then implement that. Like I say, from local web companies, if they're purely web, I would highly doubt that they've got the knowledge and experience to offer brand. For me, businesses should probably stick to what they're good at, really. If they're good at web, stick to web. It's very rare that you'll find somebody within that organisation who's a real brand specialist. Hopefully that helps.
No, it does. No, thank you for that. It's an honest answer.
Yeah. And it's always good to get fresh eyes, really. And quite often, depending on the type of project, I have somebody that I bring in on these kind of things who's very good at sort of helping to dig into it from more of a kind of marketing angle, I guess. And between the two of us, we kind of have a lot of experience in pulling these things out and really arriving at a place where you can take your brand and pushing from there. It might be that you kind of involve somebody in that sort of brand creation process, who then creates, like I say, the guidelines of how that brand should be implemented. And you take that to the web company that you're working with already because you've built a relationship and you don't want to end it. It's entirely, the options are there, really.
Thank you. That's great.
No problem at all. No problem.
How busy are you then? Are you able to take on more work at the moment, or?
It's really bizarre because whilst when coronavirus first sort of came and everybody locked down, I'd been busiest month for 12 months, to be honest.
Okay.
But it has kind of, over the past 2 or 3 weeks, it's sort of faded off, really. And I'm still working as normal. So yeah, I mean, I've got capacity at the moment for taking on projects.
Cheers.
No problem at all. Dan, you're on mute. Dan, you're on mute. Can't hear.
And I was so loud as I was talking, I couldn't hear you say
No.
So, Matt, yeah, great talk. Lots of detail there about the brand process, which was really appreciated. You know, lots of great stuff to understand. And I think, you know, the key take for me is, you know, the idea of getting lots of research done in advance in order to then be able to give it to a graphic designer. And, you know, I think as a marketing manager, I suppose, I've certainly been one of these people who's ran up designers, probably yourself at some, well, I know it's yourself at some point, but also others, and said, quick, just do this piece of work for me, I need to do that. But actually sometimes, you know, taking the moment to think and do that thought process and that research is really useful and great. And I know it's just, I wanted to quickly, because I know, you know, Karen's just put a lovely comment in, and I noticed that a couple of people have. Ruth put a lovely comment earlier as well about how well that was. So thanks for a great presentation, because I know you've not done these before, so it was
no,
particularly
it's first time. But yeah, so hopefully
you did a great job, mate. Stephen, given us a lot of information there. So, smashing. I'll let everyone crack on. Have a great weekend, folks. That's it for this week. Join us on Tuesday when we kick back off, and see you all again. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.